Alcohol sales are currently restricted in South Africa, trading to between 10 o'clock and 6 p.m. Monday to Thursday. The alcohol industry says it has noted media reports that government is considering a complete ban on alcohol sales in Gauteng. But it says that will just encourage the further growth of illicit trade and also encourage interprovincial travel at a dangerous time. Industry players have proposed the restrictions stand and suggest that taverns be allowed to sell alcohol for offsite consumption, restaurants to be allowed to remain open under a strict curfew, however. For a different view now, we're joined by Maurice Smithers, Director at the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance in South Africa. Mr. Smithers, thank you for being with us. You've been saying, I think for a while, that in fact there should be tighter alcohol restrictions.
Correct. We have been saying that for very well, since COVID began, actually.
All right, so what do you hope to hear from the President tonight?
Well, the way we look at it, Francis, although we're a social justice organization generally looking at alcohol harm, right now we're much more concerned about how alcohol might be sabotaging our efforts to fight the pandemic. And so we believe that the four key objectives is to reduce the spread of the virus, limit the pressure on hospital beds, limit the economic fallout, and to mitigate the unintended consequences of whatever restrictions are imposed, for example, the illicit trade. And we think that the only logical way to do that is to not stop off-consumption sales, as happened on the 15th of June, but to stop on-consumption sales, because, wherever alcohol is being sold, there's a risk, because alcohol tends to get people to avoid and ignore the COVID-19 protocols. There's a risk of the virus spreading. And we also know that on-consumption outlets can contribute to a rise in trauma cases through interpersonal violence and vehicle crashes. So it's much more logical to say and this is what's been done globally, by the way. In all crisis times, what happens is that on-consumption outlets are shut down completely, but off-consumption sales are still possible. And that's what we think should happen. Close all consumption outlets altogether. Allow them to sell close all on-consumptions altogether. Allow them to sell off-consumption, as actually happened in June last year, when the first ban was lifted, and stop all social gatherings, encourage people to stay at home, and extend the curfew. That's the only way we're going to stop the virus from spreading as a result of alcohol use. So
let's explain this. You think that tavern owners, they can't invite people to come in for drinks, but they can sell drinks from the tavern. Restaurants cannot serve alcohol, but they can sell alcohol for people to take home. That's your solution.
Correct. And as I say, that's exactly what happened when the initial ban in April and May last year was lifted on the 1st of June. That is what was allowed. And in doing that, you're also achieving two other things. You are limiting the economic damage, because people can still get some kind of income stream. And the second thing is, by making alcohol available, even if people cannot drink it in social gatherings, you are preventing a rise in the illicit trade of alcohol, which is another big issue that people have been pointing to.
So we'll be speaking to the Restaurants Association, but I'm interested to know, do you think this can really work? Because people go to restaurants because they can have a meal and a glass of wine with their meal. Why would they buy wine from a restaurant, which is more expensive, when they can buy it? Presumably, you still think that the retail trade should continue in the day?
Well, look, none of these solutions are easy solutions. What we are suggesting is that the reason for adopting this approach is because the only other alternative would be a complete ban on alcohol. And we know that there's going to be economic fallout as a result of that. We know also that there's going to be a rise in the illicit trade. So this is a compromise solution at a time of major crisis. I've heard before, for example, that I think Wendy Alberts has mentioned that for some restaurants, their income, 70% of their profit or their income comes from alcohol. In fact, my son is a chef, and he was telling me the other day that, in fact, on food, you put up a markup of about 35%. on alcohol, you can put up a markup of 200 to 300%. So we actually have a strange anomaly of a restaurant industry that is actually, which is supposed to be serving food, is actually reliant on alcohol to make their profits. Right now, if people want to go and eat, they have to just, we're suggesting they should just accept that they cannot have wine with their food, but they can take it home. This is a crisis. I mean, as somebody said one day, why not, we may end up in a situation where if we insist on not taking the measures we need to take, we may not actually have our friends around to have those drinks with after the pandemic.
Mr. Smithers, very quickly, would these restrictions apply only to Gauteng, where there is the pressure on the hospitals already, or countrywide?
Look, it does seem as though it's very, very critical in Gauteng. I mean, because the infection rate is 2/3 of the rate of the entire country, with the other provinces making up 1/3. So it does seem much more of a critical issue here. Nevertheless, it's going up in the Western Cape, it's going up in the Northwest, it's likely to go up in other places, and it could also lead to too much interprovincial travel if you do actually have restrictions. Look, that's a decision government would have to take. I think the message to the whole country must be that we're in a crisis, we've got a problem, we've got to do something to deal with it. And I hope that government makes the right decision, that's all.
All right, thank you for being with us. Maurice Smithers, Director of the Southern African Alcohol Policy Alliance in South Africa. Let's get a view from the restaurants. We're joined by the CEO of the Restaurant Association of South Africa, Wendy Alberts. And Ms. Alberts, you've been issuing very dire warnings. So what is the scenario if there's a complete ban on alcohol?
Look, all these opinions floating around right now are very interesting. And I think we call again for the statistical information that we've been asking for. What are we basing the facts on? What we certainly have learned, we're hours or now minutes away from the president talking to us, and we need to do things differently. And, further restrictions is just going to destroy and decimate our industry. The restaurant industry cannot account for any other further levels of lockdown or restrictions. We've seen how it's decimated our industry. We've seen what it's done over the last months. There's certainly always been speculations that we are the cause of being a super spreader. We are custodians of liquor licenses. It is how our businesses have been built. It's a combination of alcohol and liquor sales. It is how our businesses have been formatted. And all through lockdown, all the restaurant industry has done is remodel our businesses to support the various components that government has had to put through in not being readily prepared. And the history has shown that over lockdown that the restrictions haven't worked because it opens up the illicit trade, and that creates more madness on the back end. Yeah. So we're really sitting with a massively pressurized system and healthcare system that hasn't been adequately prepared. And now we're wanting to take away the only bit of controlled space that has been working. So in the two last lockdowns where alcohol has been allowed to be served within restaurants, we've showed that we have been able to maintain a degree of control. Now to completely ban alcohol shows that we're going to move backwards into a space where it didn't work before. So this is not going to have the...
Ms. Alberts, you said there's some interesting opinions. Can you respond to Maurice Smithers' idea that restaurants can sell alcohol, but people cannot have the alcohol while they're sitting down to have their meal?
Look, it's a ludicrous opinion. I mean, we are about people sitting in controlled spaces. We've got the highest degree of protocols and regulations across any board in any industry. We are able to sit. There has been very little evidence that there's been any transmission within our establishments or through food. And until somebody can bring us content, evidence, and statistical information, we're going to continue to advocate to stay open. Yeah. We are hugely concerned about the numbers. The numbers are not relation to the output that has been happening within the restaurant space. The numbers are happening because it's uncontrolled. There are different variants that are happening. We cannot continue to shut down the economy and help people to lose their jobs. I mean, what are we talking again? 500,000 livelihoods being lost, jobs, the repercussions of the food chain. We've had this dialogue over and over again. We've got to prepare ourselves adequately in this country to have sufficient health care, to have the necessary beds, to call on private sector to assist government in those disbursements, and to allow our industries to continue to trade. But we cannot just have this instant cutoff and for our businesses to be put under the financial pressure that they're constantly put under.
You say that more restaurants will die. Is there a quantification of how many restaurants have gone under due to previous lockdown measures?
Look, we certainly do know that we're a near decimated industry. When we stood outside the union buildings in January, we were imminently 7 days away from losing a total industry. Some restaurants could only trade to past 30 days. You know, we've gone through now a couple of months where we are now self-rebuilding our industry. And only by virtue of the fact that South Africa loves our industry so much have we been able to form and begin a state of recovery. There hasn't been a massive recovery plan and engagement from government or any type of recourse or money or contributions from anybody that's helped us to rebuild the industry. And so everybody is doing it single-handedly. Every single business owner has dug deeper into their pockets and has encapsulated the surrounding parts of who their customers are to keep their businesses afloat and to keep it going. And now we're faced again with no reprieve. It's not like there's a halter on leases from the landlords. It's not like there's a halter on bank loans or suppliers. We are continued to be shut down with the expectation to pay 100% of our debts. When we talk about all these opinions, the remodeling of other industries across the rest of the world have really outlined that there has been financial support, that there has been a lockdown and a blank down on the ability for people to stop the debt. We have had nothing like that in South Africa. We don't have TERS, we don't have UIF. There isn't any kind of input at the moment for support for us to continue.
Okay, Ms. Alberts, maybe the cat, if that's what it was, agrees. Just finally, I know that you've actually been personally concerned about restaurant owners that are not enforcing COVID-19 protocols because that affects everybody. Can you say tonight very quickly with a clear conscience that if there's a curfew, most restaurants will ensure that their customers are safe?
Absolutely. You know, what we did certainly see after January, you know, when our industry was faced with that decimation and we were at high risk, how quickly the restaurant industry has modeled itself back into reform. You know, we are very, very strict at executing those protocols and getting the directives out. We have reports in. When we have the reports in, we do deal with the necessary restaurant that has been compromised in the industry. We cannot afford for people not to be compliant.
Okay.
And we're also calling on the public to ensure that when they walk into a restaurant, that they are respectful, that the staff are executing the law and measuring up to the protocols that keep people safe within our establishments.
All right. Thank you very much, CEO of the Restaurants Association of South Africa, Wendy Alberts.